Gina Park sat at her desk in the corner of the diplomatic office, filing reports that nobody would ever read. Her small workspace overlooked the main floor of the Galactic Council Station, where representatives from dozens of alien species walked past without noticing her. That was exactly how she wanted it. She had been working here for 3 years. 3 years of making coffee, organizing files, and smiling politely when the other species made jokes about humans. They called her people the soft ones or the emotional children of the galaxy. Gina never corrected them. She just nodded and returned to her work. The Galactic Council Station orbited Axios Prime, a neutral world at the center of known space. The station was massive, home to over 50,000 beings from every corner of the galaxy. 3 species ruled the council. The Vryn were tall reptilian creatures with calculating minds. The Kalhari were insectoid beings who shared thoughts through their hive connection. The Lumith were pure energy, ancient and wise beyond measure. These 3 species had kept the galaxy at peace for 200 years. Humans were the newcomers. They had joined the galactic community 300 years ago, but they were still treated like junior members. The council gave them small roles, minor tasks, nothing important. Humanity had no wars to speak of in recent history. They seemed content to farm, trade, and explore peacefully. The galaxy saw them as harmless. Ina pushed a strand of black hair behind her ear and continued typing. Her supervisor, Timin Choi, walked past her desk with a stack of datapads. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair at his temples. He had worked at the council for 20 years. "Still here, Gina?" he asked, pausing at her desk. "Just finishing the cultural exchange reports," she replied, without looking up. EMI and studied her for a moment. There was something in his eyes, a knowledge that went unspoken. But he simply nodded and moved on. The day proceeded like every other day. Gina attended meetings where she took notes. She organized schedules for diplomats. She smiled at aliens who barely acknowledged her existence. She was invisible, ordinary, forgettable. That evening, everything changed. The emergency alarm sounded throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Gina stood from her desk as chaos erupted around her. Aliens ran in different directions, their voices rising in panic. She walked calmly to the main communication center. The large screens displayed a distress signal. Research Station Helios 7, located on the frontier of known space, was under attack. The automated defense systems were broadcasting footage of the assault. Gina watched as massive warships appeared in the station's orbit. They were unlike anything in the Council's database. The attacking ships opened fire without warning. Helios 7's shields failed within minutes. Then the ground assault began. Soldiers dropped from the ships, 8 feet tall and covered in natural chitinous armor. They moved through the research station like a plague, killing everything in their path. 4,000 beings lived on Helios 7. Researchers, families, children. Within an hour, they were all dead. The communication center fell silent as the final transmission cut out. A Vryn administrator turned to address the gathered crowd. The attacking force identifies themselves as the Kravath Dominion. They are demanding we surrender the entire frontier sector. If we refuse, they promise to exterminate every settlement in their path. Murmurs filled the room. Fear rippled through the assembled aliens. The galaxy had not seen war in 2 centuries. They had forgotten what it looked like. Gina stood at the back of the room, her face expressionless. But her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. 73 humans had died on Helios 7. 73 of her people, slaughtered without mercy. Over the next few days, the council held endless meetings. The Vryn proposed defensive strategies, pulling back forces to protect the core worlds. The Kalhari suggested negotiation and tribute. The Lumith recommended patience, believing the Kravath would eventually overextend themselves. Nobody suggested fighting back with force. Gina volunteered to review the attack footage. Tiemann tried to stop her. "You don't need to see that," he said quietly. "It's brutal." "I need to see it," Gina replied. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. She sat alone in a dark room, watching the recordings over and over. The screams of the dying, the laughter of the Kravath soldiers as they hunted down fleeing civilians, the final moments of researchers trying to protect their children. Something shifted in Gina's eyes as she watched. The careful mask she had worn for 3 years began to crack. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing became controlled, measured. She was no longer the quiet office worker filing reports. When she emerged from the viewing room hours later, Tiemann was waiting. He looked at her face and knew immediately. "You're going home," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm requesting emergency leave," Gina confirmed. "Earth, 2 weeks. They're going to ask questions." "Let them ask." Over the following days, other humans at the station noticed the change in Gina. She walked differently, carried herself with a new purpose. When she passed through the corridors, other humans unconsciously moved aside, giving her space. It was subtle, instinctive, like animals recognizing a predator. The council continued their debates. Ambassador Kiris, a senior Vryn diplomat, addressed the human delegation during one meeting. "Perhaps it would be best if your species remained out of military discussions. No offense intended, but humans lack the constitution for war. You are a peaceful people, after all." Gina sat in the back of the chamber, supposedly there to take notes. When Kiris spoke those words, she looked up. Her eyes met his across the room. She smiled politely, the same smile she had given 1,000 times before. But something in that smile made the ancient Vryn pause. It was the smile of a predator showing its teeth. Tiemann saw it too. He had suspected for years what Gina truly was, but now he knew for certain. The ordinary diplomatic aide was anything but ordinary. That night, Gina submitted her leave request. Destination? Earth. Reason? Personal matters. She stood at the observation window of her quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kravath Dominion was preparing for conquest. They thought the galaxy was soft, unprepared, easy prey. They had no idea what was coming. Gina touched her reflection in the glass. For 3 years, she had hidden who she was. For 3 years, she had pretended to be weak, harmless, ordinary. The galaxy thought humans had forgotten violence. They were wrong. Humans had simply chosen to set violence aside. But choice worked both ways. She pulled out a small device from her pocket, pressed her thumb to it, and spoke clearly. "Ghost 7 to command. The war has started." Requesting immediate extraction and reactivation. The response came within seconds. "Confirmed, Ghost 7. Welcome back, Major Park. Come home." Gina smiled again, and this time there was no pretense in it. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, cutting through clouds above the Korean peninsula. Gina pressed her hand against the window, watching her homeworld come into view. It had been 3 years since she last touched the soil. 3 years of pretending, of hiding, of being someone she wasn't. The shuttle landed at a military facility that didn't appear on any civilian maps. Armed guards checked her identification 3 times before allowing her through. She walked down sterile corridors until she reached a conference room deep underground. A woman in a military uniform waited inside. General Hanyul Kim was 60 years old, with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many wars. She stood when Gina entered and offered her hand. "Welcome home, Major Park." Gina shook the offered hand, feeling the weight of her real rank settle back onto her shoulders. "Thank you, General. It's good to be back." They sat across from each other at a metal table. The general slid a data pad toward Gina. "We've been monitoring the situation. The Kravith Dominion has moved 20,000 warships into formation along the frontier. They're preparing for a full invasion." "What's the Council doing?" Gina asked, though she already knew the answer. "Debating, arguing, proposing defensive strategies that won't work." The general's expression hardened. Ambassador Kiris publicly stated that humans should stay out of military planning. He said we lacked the constitution for war. Gina felt anger rise in her chest, but she controlled it. "The Council has no idea what we are." "No," the general agreed. "They don't. And that's been our advantage for 300 years. She activated a holographic display above the table. Images appeared, showing military installations across Earth and throughout human-controlled space. Bases that the Council had never detected. Training facilities disguised as sports complexes. Weapon manufacturing plants hidden inside civilian factories. "The Terran Defense Corps has 500 million active soldiers," the general explained. "Another 2 billion in reserves. We have 2,000 warships in stealth positions throughout the galaxy. Advanced weapons that we've been developing in secret. The Council thinks we're farmers and merchants. They have no concept of what we've built." Gina studied the numbers. "Why did we hide this? We could have taken a seat at the Council's table decades ago." "Because fear breeds conflict," the general replied. "When humanity first encountered the galaxy, we were fresh from our own world wars. We were violent, aggressive, divided. The Council saw us as a potential threat. We made a choice then. We would appear peaceful, harmless, ordinary. We would integrate slowly, carefully. We would let them underestimate us. And if they never attacked us, then we would have remained peaceful. The weapons would have stayed in storage. Our soldiers would have continued their normal lives." The general leaned forward. "But peace only works when everyone chooses it. The Kravith have made their choice." Gina nodded slowly. "What are my orders?" "The Council has forbidden human military involvement. They say we're not ready, not capable." The general smiled coldly. "So we're sending a volunteer defense force. 50 ships. Officially, we're providing humanitarian aid and evacuation support. And unofficially, those 50 ships carry our best soldiers, our most elite warriors. You'll command the ground forces. Captain Doyan Lee will command the fleet." The general stood. "The Kravith are moving toward the frontier world called Threshold. 20,000 refugees are trapped there. The Council is abandoning them. So we're going to save them," Gina said. "Yes, and in the process, we're going to show the Kravith what happens when they mistake peace for weakness." Over the next week, Gina trained with her unit. They were called the Ghosts, Special Forces operatives who had been embedded throughout the galaxy for decades. Each one had lived a cover identity like Gina. Teachers, merchants, engineers, diplomats. All of them were trained killers. She met with Captain Doyan Lee, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a tactical mind that had won every simulation the military could design. He showed her his battle plans, strategies that would make the Council admirals sick with their aggressive nature. "The Council fights defensively," Doyan explained, pointing to holographic displays of past galactic conflicts. "They protect, they fortify, they wait for the enemy to exhaust themselves. It's worked for 2 centuries because nobody has truly challenged them. And we fight differently," Gina said. "We attack. We strike first. We make them afraid." Doyan met her eyes. "The Kravith think they're the predators. We're going to teach them they're wrong." The human fleet assembled in secret, launching from hidden facilities on the dark side of Earth's moon. 50 ships, small by galactic standards, but packed with weapons and soldiers. Gina boarded the flagship Indomitable with 500 of her best fighters. As the fleet jumped into hyperspace, Gina stood in the drop bay with her team. They checked their weapons in silence. Rifles that looked simple, but could punch through armor. Blades that had been forged using techniques older than spaceflight. Each soldier wore light combat armor, nothing like the heavy suits favored by other species. A young soldier named Hyan approached Gina. He was 23, on his first real deployment. "Major, is it true you've been undercover for 3 years?" "Yes," Gina replied, checking the edge of her knife. "What was it like? Pretending to be weak?" Gina considered the question. "It was necessary. But every day, I remembered who I really was. Who we all really are. And what's that? Survivors. Humans endure. We adapt. And when we must, we fight." She looked around at the assembled soldiers. The galaxy forgot what we're capable of. Today, we remind them. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the threshold system. The frontier world hung in the darkness, its cities visible from orbit. Surrounding it were 500 Kravath warships, forming a blockade. On the command deck, Captain Doyon studied the tactical display. His crew worked quietly, efficiently. They had trained for this moment for years. "Captain," his sensor officer reported, "the Kravath are broadcasting a message. Put it through." A massive alien face appeared on the screen. Warlord Threx, commander of the Kravath invasion force. He was covered in scars, with 4 eyes that burned with hatred. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. "Witness the price of resistance, humans. Your soft species has sent 50 ships against our 500. We will crush you, and the galaxy will watch as your kind learns their place." Doyon smiled. "Send a reply. Tell them we accept their challenge." Throughout the galaxy, species tuned into the live broadcast. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Kiris watched the screens with other council members. They expected to see humanity's symbolic gesture destroyed within minutes. Teeman Choi stood at the back of the observation room. He had known Gina better than most. He knew what was about to happen. In the drop bay of the Indomitable, Gina's team lined up at the launch tubes. The ship shuddered as Kravath forces opened fire. But Captain Doyon was already moving, his ships breaking formation in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually perfectly coordinated. Gina pulled on her helmet and checked her weapon one final time. Through the hull, she could hear the sounds of battle beginning. Explosions, the whine of energy weapons, the roar of engines. 2 minutes to drop, the launch officer announced. Gina closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, she was no longer the quiet diplomatic aide from the council station. She was Major Gina Park, ghost operative, trained warrior, and defender of humanity. "For Helios 7, she whispered. Her team echoed the words. For Helios 7, the battle for Threshold was about to begin. The drop pods launched from the Indomitable like bullets from a gun. Gina felt the acceleration press her into her seat as the pod screamed toward Threshold's surface. Through the small window, she watched the chaos of the space battle above. Human ships moved like dancers, weaving between Kravath vessels that were bigger but slower. Captain Doyon's voice came through the communication channel. "Ground team, you have a clear path. Enemy forces are landing in Sector 7. 20 Kravath dropships." "Understood," Gina replied. "We're on our way." The pod shook violently as it hit the atmosphere. Fire surrounded the small craft as it fell. Then the retro rockets fired, and the pod slammed into the ground. The door exploded outward, and Gina was moving before the smoke cleared. Her team emerged from their pods in perfect formation. 50 soldiers, the best humanity had trained. They were in the middle of a refugee camp, surrounded by thousands of terrified aliens. Buildings burned in the distance. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the streets. "Move!" Gina ordered. They ran toward the sound of battle. The Kravath had landed on the far side of the city and were pushing toward the refugee center. Gina's tactical display showed 5,000 enemy soldiers advancing in a line. They were burning everything in their path. The first contact came at the edge of the commercial district. 3 Kravath warriors rounded a corner and stopped when they saw the humans. The aliens were massive, 8 feet tall with natural armor covering their bodies. They carried weapons that looked like they could tear a human in half. They laughed when they saw Gina and her team. That was their first mistake. Gina raised her rifle and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. Each bullet found the weak points in the Kravath armor where the plates joined. The 3 warriors fell before they could react. Her team moved forward, stepping over the bodies without slowing down. "They're smaller than expected," Hyan said over the communication channel. "Don't get cocky," Gina warned. "Keep moving." They advanced through the city in a pattern that would have seemed random to an outside observer. But each movement was calculated, practiced 10,000 times in training. They used the buildings for cover, moved through shadows, struck from unexpected angles. The Kravath expected a defensive line. They expected the humans to dig in and fight from fortified positions. Instead, Gina's team attacked. They hit the Kravath forces from 3 sides at once. Small groups of humans appearing from nowhere, firing with precision, then vanishing before the enemy could respond. The Kravath warriors were strong and well-armored, but they were used to fighting opponents who stood and fought. They didn't know how to handle enemies who moved like ghosts. Above the planet, the space battle raged. Captain Doyan watched his tactical display as his 50 ships danced around 500 Kravath vessels. The enemy had numbers, but humans had 300 years of studying every galactic conflict. "They're trying to surround us," his tactical officer reported. "Let them," Doyan replied calmly. Execute pattern Delta 7. 3 human ships broke formation and charged directly at the Kravath center. The enemy commanders took the bait, moving their ships to intercept. That's when the rest of the human fleet struck from behind, targeting the Kravath engines with railguns that appeared from hidden compartments. 10 Kravath ships exploded in the first volley. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Kiris stared at the screens in disbelief. "How are they doing this?" He whispered. "Ta." EMI stood nearby, watching the battle with a sad smile. "Because they were never weak. We just let you think they were." Back on Threshold, Gina's team had penetrated deep into enemy territory. They moved through a burning marketplace, heading toward the Kravath command post. Dead aliens lined the streets, evidence of the human advance. A massive Kravath champion stepped out to challenge them. He was 10 feet tall, covered in battle scars, carrying a weapon that looked like a cross between an axe and a gun. He roared something in his language, probably a challenge. Gina didn't break stride. She pulled a blade from her belt, a simple combat knife that her ancestors had carried for centuries. The Kravath champion laughed and charged. Gina waited until the last moment, then dropped and rolled beneath his swing. As she came up, her KN, Ife found the joint in his leg armor. The champion stumbled. Before he could recover, Gina was on his back. Her blade finding the weak point at the base of his skull. The massive warrior fell like a tree. The entire exchange had taken 3 seconds. The battle cameras captured everything. Throughout the galaxy, species watched in shock as the weak humans systematically destroyed a superior force. Every move was efficient, practiced, deadly. These weren't amateur soldiers playing at war. These were professionals who had perfected violence into an art form god in the Kravath command ship. Warlord Threx watched the feeds with growing concern. His warriors were dying. The humans were everywhere, appearing from nowhere, striking with impossible precision. And in space, his fleet was being torn apart by ships that shouldn't have been able to challenge him. "How many humans are on the ground?" he demanded. "Sensors detect approximately 50 soldiers, my lord." 50? Threx roared. "We have 5,000 warriors down there. How are 50 soldiers causing this much damage?" His tactical officer had no answer. Gina reached the Kravath command post with 30 of her soldiers. The other 20 were scattered throughout the city, hitting supply lines and communication centers. The command post was a fortified building in the center of the occupied zone. 200 Kravath warriors guarded it. "Hyan, take your squad and flank from the east." "Wait for my signal." "Yes, Major." Gina studied the building through her scope. She could see the Kravath commanders inside, planning their next move. They thought they were safe behind their walls and guards. "All units," Gina said calmly into her communicator. "Execute assault pattern Omega." What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The human soldiers moved like they were one organism, each knowing exactly where the others would be. They used grenades to create chaos, smoke to hide their movements, and precision fire to eliminate targets. Within 3 minutes, the 200 guards were dead or scattered. Gina walked through the front door of the command post. Inside, Kravath officers scrambled for weapons. She shot the first 2, her bullets finding the gaps in their armor. The third tried to close with her, thinking his size would be an advantage. She used his momentum against him, redirecting his charge into a wall. While he was stunned, her knife found his throat. The last officer in the room dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Gina approached him slowly, her blade still dripping. "Tell your warlord," she said in perfect Kravath language, "the threshold is under human protection. Leave now or join your dead." The officer nodded frantically. Gina gestured, and 2 of her soldiers took him away to broadcast the message dot in space. Captain Doyan's fleet had reduced the Kravath forces to 300 ships. The human vessels were battered. 12 had been destroyed, but they were winning. Doyan watched as the Kravath fleet began to break formation. "They're retreating," his tactical officer reported. "Let them go," Doyan ordered. "But transmit the ground battle footage on all frequencies. I want the galaxy to see what happened here." The footage went viral within minutes. Every species in the galaxy watched as Major Gina Park, a woman who had been a diplomatic aide just weeks ago, stood over fallen Kravath warriors. Her armor was scorched, her face was covered in dirt, but her eyes were clear and calm. One clip was shared more than any other. Gina standing in the ruins of the Kravath command post, surrounded by alien soldiers twice her size, all of them dead. The caption read simply, "Human diplomatic aide revealed as elite warrior." Ambassador Kiris watched the footage 3 times. "What have we been living beside?" He whispered. The Kravath fleet fled the system, leaving their ground forces to surrender. 5,000 warriors defeated by 50 humans. Warlord Threx retreated to his command ship and prepared for what would come next. On threshold, refugees emerged from their hiding places. They stared at the human soldiers in awe and fear. These small beings had saved them from certain death. But the way they had fought, the efficient brutality of it, was terrifying. Gina removed her helmet and looked at the gathered crowd. "You're safe now," she said simply. "We'll stay until Council forces arrive." An elderly Vryn refugee approached her slowly. "Thank you. But I must ask, who are you really? The galaxy says humans are peaceful." Gina smiled tiredly. "We are peaceful. We choose to be peaceful. But we never forgot how to fight. We just hoped we'd never have to show you." Above the planet, Captain Doyan broadcast a message to the fleeing Kravath fleet. "Tell your commanders what happened here. Tell them that humanity is no longer hiding. and tell them that if they return, we will finish what they started. The message was received throughout the galaxy. Humanity, the species everyone had dismissed as weak and ordinary, had just won an impossible battle. The questions began immediately. How had they hidden this capability? What else were they hiding? And most importantly, what would the Galactic Council do about it? Gina sat on the steps of the ruined command post, cleaning her blade. Her team gathered around her, exhausted but victorious. They had lost 3 soldiers in the battle, and those deaths weighed heavily on her, but they had saved 20,000 lives. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated, and they had sent a message to the Kravath Dominion that would echo through the stars. The age of human secrecy was over. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Every representative from every member species packed into the main chamber. The air was thick with tension and fear. On the massive screens surrounding the room, footage from the Battle of Threshold played on an endless loop. Ambassador Minho Kong stood at the human delegation's position, calm and composed. He was 70 years old, with white hair and the patient expression of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. Behind him stood Gina, still in her combat armor, and Captain Doyon Lee, his uniform showing scorch marks from the battle. Ambassador Kiris of the Vrin rose to speak first. His reptilian features were twisted in anger. You lied to us. For 300 years, you maintained a secret military force. You presented yourselves as peaceful while building weapons and training soldiers. This is a betrayal of everything the Council stands for. The chamber erupted in agreement. Representatives from dozens of species shouted accusations. The humans had deceived them. The humans were dangerous. The humans could not be trusted. Minho waited for the noise to die down. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried throughout the chamber. We never lied. We simply didn't volunteer information you never asked for. That's semantics, Pyrrhus snapped. No, Minho replied firmly. It's the truth. When humanity joined the galactic community, we filled out every form, answered every question honestly. Nobody asked if we had a military. Nobody asked about our capacity for violence. You saw what you wanted to see, a peaceful species, and you stopped looking deeper. A Kelhari representative spoke, her multiple voices blending into one. But why hide this? Why not take your proper place among the warrior species? Minho activated a holographic display. Images appeared above the chamber, showing Earth's bloody history. World wars, nuclear weapons, genocides. The assembled aliens watched in horror as humanity's violent past unfolded before them. This is what we were, Minho explained. For thousands of years, we killed each other over land, resources, beliefs, the color of our skin. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We came within minutes of ending our own species multiple times. The images shifted, showing the formation of Earth's unified government. The decision to hide humanity's military capabilities when they encountered the galaxy. When we met you, we had just achieved peace among ourselves. It was fragile, new. We looked at the galaxy and saw species who had forgotten war. The Council had maintained peace for 2 centuries. We made a choice. Minho looked around the chamber. We could present ourselves as we were, fresh from our wars, and risk being feared and isolated. Or we could hide our capacity for violence and integrate slowly, peacefully. So you manipulated us, Kiris said. We protected ourselves, Minho corrected. Every species in this chamber has advantages. The Vrin have superior strategic minds. The Kalahari have collective consciousness. The Lumith can manipulate energy. Humans have adaptability and the capacity for controlled violence. We simply chose not to advertise our strength. And now, One of the Lumith asked, their voice like wind chimes. "What do you want?" "The same thing we've always wanted. Peace, cooperation, a place in the galactic community." Minho paused. "But on equal terms. No more being treated as children. No more being dismissed because you think we're weak." The chamber erupted again. Some species demanded humanity be expelled from the council. Others wanted restrictions placed on human military forces. A few, mostly those who had lost people in the Kravath attacks, remained silent. That's when Gina stepped forward. The chamber fell quiet as the warrior from the battle recordings approached the speaking platform. Ambassador Kiris stared at her, seeing the diplomatic aid he had ignored for years now revealed as a trained killer. "I was stationed at this council for 3 years," Gina said, her voice clear and steady. "Every day I filed reports, made coffee, smiled politely while you dismissed my species as weak. Some of you made jokes about humans being too emotional, too soft. I never corrected you. You enjoyed deceiving us," Kiris accused. "No," Gina replied. "I hated it. Do you know what it's like to hide who you are for years? To pretend to be harmless when you're trained to protect? To watch people mock your species and say nothing?" She met the Vrin's eyes. "But I did it because it was necessary. Because humanity's safety depended on the galaxy underestimating us." A young Vrin in the diplomatic section spoke up. "But the recordings from Threshold, the way you fought, that wasn't defense. That was aggression." "Yes," Gina agreed. "Because the Kravath gave us no choice. They slaughtered 4,000 people at Helios 7. They attacked Threshold with the intent to kill 20,000 more. We didn't start this war, but we're very good at finishing them." The Kalhari representative's many voices spoke as one. "How many soldiers do you have?" Minho answered, 500 million active, 2 billion in reserves, 2,000 warships currently in service, with capacity to build more. The numbers stunned the chamber into silence. Humanity had a military force larger than the next 5 species combined, and they had hidden it perfectly for 3 centuries. "What's to stop you from conquering us?" A small delegate asked fearfully. "The same thing that stopped us for 300 years, Minho replied. "Choice. We don't want to conquer. We want to coexist. But we will not be victims." Before anyone could respond, alarms sounded throughout the station. The chamber's screens switched to show incoming alerts. The Kravath Dominion had launched a full-scale invasion. 5,000 warships were heading toward the Council's core worlds. The message from Warlord Threx was simple and brutal. "We will erase the humans first and enslave the rest of you." Panic filled the chamber. The Council's own forces were scattered, unprepared for an attack of this scale. They had been relying on diplomacy and the threat of collective action. But the Kravath weren't interested in either. Ambassador Kiris looked at the screens in horror. "We need to evacuate. Pull back to the fortress worlds. Gather our forces." "That will take weeks," another representative said. "They'll have conquered a dozen systems by then." The arguing began again, louder and more disparate. Species blamed each other for the lack of preparation. Some suggested immediate surrender. Others wanted to flee to the outer rim. Minho stood, and his voice cut through the chaos. "We can help." The chamber fell silent. "We can stop them," Minho continued. "But we need full authorization to act. No restrictions. No committees. No debates. Give us command, and we'll handle the Kravath." "Give humans military control?" Kiris looked horrified. "After you've proven you're capable of hiding secrets for centuries? Do you have a better option?" Minho asked simply. The Lumith representative spoke, their ancient voice carrying authority. "The humans chose peace when they could have chosen war. They revealed themselves to save others, not to conquer. I vote we accept their offer. Seconded, said a Kellerai representative, whose hive had lost members at Helios-7. The vote was taken. It wasn't unanimous. Many species were still afraid of humanity's revealed power. But fear of the Cravath was greater. The motion passed. Mingho nodded. General Hanyul Kim will take supreme command of all military operations. All council forces will be integrated into human command structure. Is this acceptable? Reluctant agreement rippled through the chamber. Then we have work to do, Minho said. He turned to Gina. Colonel Park, you're being promoted. Report to General Kim immediately. Gina saluted. Yes, sir. As the council chamber emptied, Teeman approached Gina. Colonel now? Congratulations. It doesn't feel like a victory, Gina replied, looking at the screens showing the Cravath fleet approaching. A lot of people are going to die before this is over. But you'll save more, Teeman said. That's what you've always done. That's what humans do. Across human space, hidden military installations came online. Stealth fields dropped. Ships emerged from concealment. 500 million soldiers received activation orders. The reserves, over 2 billion people, began reporting for duty. The galaxy was about to see what humanity had been hiding. Not just weapons and soldiers, but a philosophy of warfare that the peaceful council had forgotten. The humans didn't fight to protect territory or to achieve political goals. They fought to eliminate threats permanently. The Cravath wanted war. They were about to learn what that truly meant. General Kim stood in the command center on Earth, watching displays showing her forces mobilizing. Next to her, Captain Doyon coordinated the fleet movements. Gina arrived and took her position as commander of ground forces. The Cravath have made their move, the general said. Now we make ours. Captain Lee, prepare the fleet. Colonel Park, ready your soldiers. We're not defending anymore. She looked at her officers, and her expression was cold and hard. We're attacking. Somewhere in deep space, Warlord Threx watched his fleet advance toward the core worlds. He had seen the recordings from Threshold, but he refused to believe that 50 humans could really be that dangerous. His species had conquered 100 worlds. They were the ultimate warriors,